The coffee had gone cold again. General Alfred Jodl pushed aside his meager breakfast at Wehrmacht headquarters. Outside Berlin's windows, spring sunlight filtered through in 1944. But inside these strategy rooms, the light revealed harsh truths. Military leaders of Germany once believed completely in their power. They thought Britain would starve into surrender. They assumed Soviet resistance would crumble under relentless pressure. These same officers now counted breadcrumbs. They studied reports from across the Atlantic Ocean, reports they had previously dismissed as pure American lies. Franklin Delano Roosevelt had made his announcement in May 1940. He stood before the American Congress with ambitious promises. America would produce 185,000 aircraft within 2 years. The nation would build 120,000 tanks during the same period. Anti-aircraft guns would number 55,000 units. Merchant shipping would reach 18 million tons. Adolf Hitler's military advisors heard these numbers with complete disbelief. American aircraft production in 1939 told a different story entirely. The United States military received fewer than 3,000 planes that year. How could farmers and industrial workers achieve such impossible goals? These Americans were still recovering from economic depression. German intelligence painted America as internally divided. Unemployment still affected more than 5 million people in 1940. Years of New Deal programs had failed to solve basic problems. Wehrmacht Strategic Planning Department saw weakness everywhere in America. They observed a nation that had never fought modern industrial warfare. A president in a wheelchair led this supposed threat. The American Army ranked 17th globally in 1940. Portugal had stronger forces. Romania possessed better equipment. What German planners failed to grasp was simple truth. America's peaceful appearance concealed the world's most powerful industrial machine. This engine waited for awakening. German High Command made their first crucial error through fundamental misunderstanding. They viewed the United States through their own experience of scarcity. Every calorie required careful calculation in Germany. Metal came through strict rationing systems. Fuel represented precious resources beyond normal measure. They could not imagine a nation where abundance flowed freely. German officers heard reports of American soldiers receiving better food than their own headquarters staff. Such luxury seemed impossible and wasteful. American soldiers carried chocolate as standard equipment. Cigarettes came with every meal. Chewing gum appeared in regulation supply packets. German commanders laughed at these reports. Such indulgences would surely weaken fighting spirit. Resources spent on comfort items meant fewer weapons and ammunition. Their laughter would end abruptly as American production achieved unthinkable levels. Assembly lines that revolutionized automobile manufacturing now served military purposes. Henry Ford's innovations had perfected car production at incredible speed. One complete automobile rolled off Ford lines every 69 seconds. This same expertise transferred directly to B-24 Liberator bomber construction. German weapons manufacturers still took pride in handcrafted excellence. Each rifle received individual attention from skilled craftsmen. Precise tolerances demanded careful work and significant time. American factories embraced completely different principles. Mass production used interchangeable parts throughout. Standardized designs allowed rapid assembly and easy field repairs. General Wilhelm Keitel served as Hitler's chief of staff. He studied American production figures with the same dismissive attitude his predecessors had shown toward British determination in the previous World War. America appeared too comfortable for sustained warfare. Regional differences would tear the nation apart. Ethnic divisions would prevent unified effort. These conclusions proved catastrophically wrong. German observers noted American reluctance to enter European fighting. They mistook careful preparation for fundamental weakness. President Roosevelt used this time for the greatest military buildup in human history. The transformation began before Pearl Harbor changed everything. The Lend-Lease program allowed American factories to retool for war production. General Motors converted automobile plants to produce tanks and aircraft engines. Shipyards that had built pleasure boats now launched Liberty ships. 3 new vessels entered service daily. The Willow Run plant in Michigan stretched more than half a mile in length. Albert Kahn designed this massive facility. 42,000 workers produced B-24 bombers around the clock. By 1944, American factories completed 1 bomber every single hour. New ships launched every 4.5 hours. American planners understood that industrial might alone could not guarantee victory. Wars were won by keeping soldiers fed and supplied thousands of miles from home bases. Fighting effectiveness required proper nutrition under impossible conditions. This realization led to revolutionary innovations in military logistics and field rations. German soldiers in Stalingrad fought over bread crusts during the siege. They melted snow for drinking water when supplies failed. American GIs carried complete meals in their pockets. These rations could sustain combat operations for multiple days. Extra items included luxuries that would seem impossible to enemy forces. Revolutionary field ration development began in 1941. The War Department tasked the Army's Quartermaster Corps with solving an impossible challenge. How do you feed soldiers dropped behind enemy lines? What about troops cut off from supply trains? How do you maintain nutrition when traditional field kitchens cannot operate? The answer came from an unexpected source. Ansel Keys worked as a physiologist at the University of Minnesota. His previous research involved high-altitude physiology in the Andes Mountains. War Department planners somehow decided this qualified him to design pocket rations for paratroopers. Keys approached the problem with scientific precision and Midwestern practicality. Colonel Roland Isker accompanied him to a Minneapolis grocery store. They purchased 30 servings of the most durable, calorie-dense foods available. Hard biscuits provided basic nutrition and long shelf life. Dried sausage offered protein and flavor. Chocolate bars delivered quick energy and familiar comfort. Hard candy supplied additional calories and morale benefits. The resulting meal weighed exactly 28 ounces. It packed 3,200 calories into a compact package. This amount could sustain a soldier through the most demanding operations. The ration fit in a soldier's pocket without additional equipment. No preparation was needed. No cooking was required. Fort Snelling provided the location for initial testing. 1 platoon of soldiers consumed Keyes's experimental ration for 3 consecutive days. Though they ate it without enthusiasm, as Keyes diplomatically noted, they showed no significant weight loss. Performance levels remained steady throughout the trial period. A second trial at Fort Benning proved more successful. Fort Benning housed the Army's paratrooper school. Comfort items made the crucial difference. Cigarettes provided familiar relaxation. Matches ensured functionality in field conditions. Chewing gum offered psychological comfort. Toilet paper addressed basic sanitary needs. The airborne troops approved of the improved version. May 1942 brought the Army's first major order. The Wrigley Chewing Gum Company received a contract for 1 million field rations. These became officially designated as Field Ration, Type K. The name honored Dr. Keyes and his breakthrough work. The K-Ration represented only the beginning of American innovation. Food scientists and industrial engineers simultaneously developed the C-Ration system. This more substantial meal was designed for longer operations where weight restrictions were less critical. German armies relied on horse-drawn supply wagons. Their increasingly unreliable rail networks struggled under constant air attack. American military logistics built around completely different principles. Standardization allowed efficient production and distribution. Mass production reduced costs and increased availability. American soldiers would fight more effectively when properly fed. Each C ration consisted of two 12-ounce cans with complete meals. One can contained a main course, such as pork and beans. Beef stew provided protein and familiar flavors. Chicken with vegetables offered variety and nutrition. The second can packed extras, including chocolate for energy. Biscuits supplied carbohydrates and texture. Cigarettes provided psychological comfort. Chewing gum offered stress relief and oral satisfaction. C ration production showcased American industrial coordination at its finest. H.J. Heinz and Republic Foods supplied the meat components. Peter Paul and Charms provided specialized candy formulations. Nescafé delivered instant coffee designed for military use. Miles Laboratories contributed lemon juice powder for vitamin C. Beeman's, Wrigley's, and Dentyne produced gum specifically for military service. Major cigarette companies, including Camel, Chesterfield, and Philip Morris, packaged 4 cigarette packs. These were designed specifically for military distribution. The result created a complete meal system with psychological benefits. Nutrition was only part of the equation. These rations offered soldiers a genuine taste of home. Familiar brands provided comfort in foreign environments. Small luxuries reminded troops what they were fighting to protect. German military planners could not comprehend this scale of coordination. Their own supply situation grew more desperate daily. American factories produced millions of individual rations monthly by 1944. Each ration represented industrial coordination, stretching across the entire continent. Minnesota wheat fields provided basic grains. California citrus groves supplied vitamin C. Virginia tobacco farms grew cigarette tobacco. Pennsylvania chocolate factories produced candy components. German soldiers scraped together meals from captured supplies. Wehrmacht stores dwindled rapidly under Allied pressure. Every American soldier carried days' worth of food in his pack or pocket. Combat effectiveness could be maintained regardless of supply line status. Psychological impact extended far beyond simple caloric content. Soldiers fighting in Normandy's hedgerows faced constant danger. Pacific jungle warfare tested human endurance. Italian mountain combat challenged physical limits. Opening a K-Ration meant unwrapping a small piece of America. The chocolate tasted exactly like home varieties. Cigarettes provided familiar comfort brands. Chewing gum offered moments of normalcy amid chaos. German prisoners encountered these rations with complete amazement. Such abundance seemed impossible for ordinary soldiers. They had been told Americans were weak and poorly supplied. The reality contradicted everything Nazi propaganda had claimed. The true test would come on Normandy's beaches. Operation Overlord represented the largest amphibious invasion in military history. Success would depend entirely on supply and sustainment capabilities. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers would fight thousands of miles from home. Every man would need food, ammunition, medical care, and complete logistical support. This network had to function under constant enemy fire. The worst weather in 40 years would test every system. Allied planning for Operation Overlord intensified through 1943 and early 1944. Commanders grappled with logistics puzzles that made previous campaigns seem simple. The invasion required landing more than 150,000 troops on the first day alone. Sustained buildup would eventually place more than 2 million Allied soldiers on the European continent. Each soldier needed complete support regardless of tactical situation. Quartermaster sergeants and supply personnel would determine the outcome. Industrial workers who had transformed American agriculture and manufacturing into war instruments would prove decisive. First landing craft approached the Norman coast in pre-dawn darkness of June 6, 1944. They carried more than soldiers and weapon systems. They transported the concentrated productive power of American farms and factories. Millions of individual rations would sustain the greatest military operation in history. Paratroopers dropping behind German lines carried sufficient food for independent operations. Infantry wading ashore under withering fire had complete nutrition in their packs. Supply dumps established under enemy artillery bombardment contained abundance German commanders could not imagine. These simple food packages represented what the German High Command had consistently underestimated. America possessed the ability to project not just military force across oceans. The entire productive capacity of a continental economy could be deployed into enemy territory. German generals who had laughed at American production targets were about to discover their catastrophic error. The farmers and factory workers of America had indeed transformed their nation. The arsenal of democracy had become reality. First reports reached Wehrmacht headquarters describing the Allied landing's scale and sophistication. German generals began to understand their fundamental miscalculation. They had misjudged American productive capacity completely. More importantly, they had underestimated the determination of a people who had turned abundance into a weapon. This weapon proved more powerful than any tank or bomber in their arsenal. The storm that battered the English Channel on June 19, 1944, created the worst conditions in 4 decades. Waves reached 8.5 feet in height. Wind gusts exceeded 32 knots regularly. Carefully planned logistics for the Normandy invasion became a nightmare. Floating debris filled the water. Landing craft swamped in rough seas. Supply shortages threatened to strangle the Allied foothold before it could establish permanent presence. German defenders watched hopefully for signs that invaders might retreat due to starvation. American quartermasters were already demonstrating the revolutionary logistic system that would doom the Third Reich. By June 18th, just 12 days after D-Day, Allied forces had successfully landed 116,000 tons of supplies. This represented nearly 73% of their ambitious targets, despite the devastating storm conditions. More remarkably, they sustained 314,000 American troops, representing 11 of the planned 12 divisions. Simultaneously, they evacuated 14,000 casualties by sea, while shipping 10,000 German prisoners back to Britain. This level of logistical coordination was unprecedented in military history. The same industrial thinking that transformed American ration production made such achievements possible. Private First Class Robert Chen of the 29th Infantry Division crouched in a Norman hedgerow 3 miles inland from Omaha Beach. German artillery thundered in the distance as he pulled a K-Ration from his pack. The familiar brown cardboard box measured no larger than a paperback book. It contained everything needed to maintain combat effectiveness for the next 8 hours. Canned ham and eggs provided breakfast protein. Crackers offered carbohydrates and familiar texture. Fruit paste supplied vitamins and natural sugars. Instant coffee delivered caffeine and comfort. Sugar tablets provided quick energy when needed. 4 Camel cigarettes offered psychological relief. 1 stick of Beeman's chewing gum aided stress management. Water purification tablets ensured safe drinking water from any source. To Chen, this represented just another standard meal. To the German machine gunner watching from across the field, it demonstrated industrial and logistical capability beyond comprehension. Wehrmacht Obergefreiter Hans Müller defended a strong point near Sainte-Mère Église. He had survived on half rations since February. His daily food allowance consisted of 200 grams of black bread. 20 grams of ersatz butter provided minimal fat content. Whatever soup could be made from dwindling supplies of turnips and potatoes completed his nutrition. Miller's unit captured an American supply dump in late June. The German soldiers could hardly believe what they discovered. Case after case of C rations stretched before them in seemingly endless rows. Each case contained two 12-ounce cans packed with beef stew. Some held pork and beans with rich sauce. Others contained chicken and vegetables in savory broth. Chocolate accompanied every meal along with biscuits. Cigarettes and chewing gum appeared in quantities that would have been considered luxuries in the Reich even before the war began. The contrast became even more stark when Allied intelligence officers interrogated captured German soldiers. Unteroffizier Friedrich Weber was taken prisoner during the failed Mortain counterattack in August. He described his amazement at American abundance in a report that reached General Omar Bradley's headquarters directly. "We were told that America was a nation of soft farmers who could never sustain real war," Weber stated during interrogation. "But your soldiers eat better in the field than our officers do at headquarters. They throw away food we would fight over. They have chocolate and cigarettes like they were free. How can we defeat an enemy who considers such things normal supplies for ordinary soldiers?" This abundance resulted from careful planning that began years before the first American soldier set foot in France. The Quartermaster Corps had learned from failures of previous wars. Soldiers weakened by poor nutrition became vulnerable to disease and exhaustion. American military nutritionists established that combat soldiers required 3,500 calories per day to maintain fighting effectiveness. This contrasted sharply with the 1,500 calories per day that German civilians received in some areas during the final months of the war. More importantly, planners recognized that well-fed soldiers fought with higher morale. They suffered fewer casualties and maintained unit cohesion under extreme stress. Production statistics behind this abundance tell the complete story of American industrial mobilization in stark numerical terms. By 1944, American factories were producing more than 50 million K-rations monthly. 30 million C rations rolled off production lines during the same period. The Wrigley Chewing Gum Company alone manufactured more than 1 billion individual ration components during the entire war. Peter Paul Incorporated produced specialized chocolate bars designed to withstand tropical heat and Arctic cold extremes. Nescafé developed instant coffee formulations specifically for military field use. This coordination required precise planning across dozens of separate industries. Tin can manufacturers worked to military specifications. Tobacco companies modified their production schedules. All participants worked toward the single goal of keeping American soldiers properly fed anywhere in the world. German failure to match this logistical capability reflected deeper problems in Nazi economic planning and military doctrine. American factories embraced mass production techniques pioneered by Henry Ford decades earlier. German industry remained wedded to artisanal traditions that emphasized quality over quantity in all circumstances. German commanders preferred handcrafted weapons with precise tolerances. They favored these over standardized equipment that could be produced rapidly and repaired easily in field conditions. This philosophy extended directly to food production systems. The Wehrmacht continued to rely on traditional supply methods even as modern warfare demanded revolutionary logistic solutions. German supply lines stretched across thousands of miles. They ran from factories in the Ruhr industrial region to battlefields in France. These lines depended heavily on horse-drawn wagons and increasingly unreliable railways. Allied bombers targeted transportation infrastructure systematically. American logistics operated on completely different principles. Forward positioning became the standard practice. Supplies came prepackaged and ready for immediate distribution. American rations required no cooking and no additional preparation. No specialized equipment was necessary for consumption. A single soldier could carry 3 days' worth of complete nutrition in his pack. German soldiers depended on field kitchens and supply trains. These became increasingly vulnerable to air attack as the war progressed. Psychological impact of superior logistics extended far beyond simple nutrition requirements. German prisoners consistently reported their amazement at American material abundance. They described it as proof that Reich propaganda about American weakness had been completely false from the beginning. Obergefreiter Klaus Richter was captured near Cherbourg during the Allied advance. He wrote in a letter that was intercepted by Allied censors. "They told us Americans were soft and weak," Richter wrote to his family. "They said Americans would run at the first sign of real fighting. But these soldiers have everything they need, and more. They share their chocolate with French children. They give cigarettes to prisoners. This is not the behavior of a desperate enemy. This is the confidence of certain victory." Strategic implications became clear as the Allied advance accelerated after Operation Cobra. This was the breakout from Normandy that began on July 25, 1944. American mobile units were supplied by an elaborate network of forward depots and truck convoys. They could maintain offensive operations for weeks without pausing to establish traditional supply lines. Each American soldier carried sufficient rations to sustain completely independent operations. German defenders found themselves increasingly dependent on supply lines that Allied air power systematically destroyed. General Heinz Guderian had been the architect of German blitzkrieg tactics. He recognized the revolutionary nature of American logistics in a post-war interview conducted by Allied intelligence officers. "We had perfected the art of rapid advance," Guderian admitted, "but we had never solved the problem of sustained operations at distance from our bases. The Americans did not just copy our tactical methods. They surpassed them by creating a supply system that could support continuous offensive operations across an entire continent. Their soldiers carried their logistics with them in ways we had never imagined possible." The contrast became most apparent during autumn fighting when German forces struggled to maintain defensive positions. American units pressed forward with seemingly inexhaustible supplies flowing from rear areas. Major General J. Lawton Collins commanded the 7th Corps during this period. He noted in his personal diary that American casualties from malnutrition and diet-related illness were virtually non-existent. This contrasted sharply with reports from German prisoners describing widespread hunger. Vitamin deficiency diseases appeared commonly among captured Wehrmacht personnel. Declining morale directly resulted from inadequate food supplies reaching frontline units. German High Command's response to American logistical superiority revealed the depth of their fundamental miscalculation. Rather than recognizing the systematic nature of American industrial planning, they attributed Allied success to temporary advantages. These could supposedly be overcome through superior tactics or secret weapons development. Hitler's insistence on developing rocket technology and jet aircraft continued, while German soldiers went hungry. This demonstrated a fundamental misunderstanding of modern warfare's dependence on sustained industrial production rather than technological breakthroughs alone. American ration science continued to evolve throughout the European campaign. Field testing led to constant improvements in nutrition, packaging, and variety. The Quartermaster Subsistence Research Laboratory in Chicago employed food scientists, nutritionists, and packaging engineers. They developed new products based on direct feedback from combat units in active theaters. Soldiers' preferences were reported through regular surveys conducted by military personnel. These influenced everything from flavor combinations to portion sizes in subsequent production runs. This systematic approach to soldier welfare reflected American democratic values translated into military practice. The needs and opinions of ordinary soldiers mattered enough to drive continuous improvement in equipment and supplies. This contrasted sharply with authoritarian military systems, where individual soldiers were considered expendable resources. Broader implications extended beyond immediate military operations to post-war reconstruction efforts. American abundance demonstrated through military rations shaped European perceptions of American society and economic systems permanently. French civilians witnessed American soldiers sharing chocolate and cigarettes with children regularly. They began to understand that reports of American prosperity were not propaganda, but observable reality. German prisoners of war, many of whom remained in American custody until 1947, returned to Germany with first-hand knowledge of American industrial capability. This contradicted years of Nazi propaganda about American weakness and decadence. They had experienced American abundance directly and could not be convinced otherwise. Statistical records of American food production during the war provide concrete evidence of industrial transformation that German leaders had dismissed as impossible. Between 1941 and 1945, American agriculture increased production by 25%. This occurred while simultaneously providing food aid to Britain, the Soviet Union, and liberated territories across Europe. American meat production reached record levels despite civilian rationing that limited domestic consumption. Wheat harvests exceeded all previous records while providing both domestic needs and export requirements for allied nations worldwide. This agricultural abundance translated directly into military advantage through the ration system that sustained combat operations. American soldiers consumed more protein, vitamins, and calories than any military force in history. They maintained variety and comfort foods that sustained morale during prolonged combat operations under extreme conditions. The psychological benefits were measurable through statistical analysis. American units showed lower rates of combat fatigue compared to forces with inferior supply systems. Fewer disciplinary problems occurred among well-fed troops. Higher levels of unit cohesion persisted throughout extended campaigns. Allied forces crossed the Rhine River in March 1945, marking the final phase of the European War. The contrast between American abundance and German desperation reached its dramatic climax. American soldiers were supported by an unbroken chain of supply, stretching back to farms and factories in Kansas and Michigan. They advanced into a Germany where civilians survived on fewer calories than American military rations provided in a single meal. Well-fed, well-supplied American troops distributed chocolate and cigarettes to starving German children. This provided a final devastating illustration of the industrial might that German leaders had so catastrophically underestimated throughout the conflict. German resistance collapsed completely in May 1945, bringing American occupation forces face-to-face with the consequences of Nazi Germany's failure to match Allied logistical capabilities. In displaced persons camps, American rations became life-saving aid for Holocaust survivors and refugees from across Europe. In prisoner-of-war camps, German soldiers experienced for the first time the food security that American troops had taken for granted throughout the entire war. Former Wehrmacht officers were interviewed by American intelligence services during the post-war period. They consistently cited logistical superiority as the decisive factor in German defeat, rather than tactical or strategic failures. The industrial capacity that had seemed impossible in 1940 had proven real and decisive by 1945. legacy of this logistical revolution extended far beyond World War II itself into the post-war world. Industrial techniques developed for ration production influenced civilian food processing. Innovations in packaging, preservation, and distribution transformed food systems worldwide. Coordination between military requirements and civilian industry established patterns of cooperation that would define American defense procurement for generations to come. Scientific approaches to nutrition and soldier welfare became standard practice for modern military forces worldwide. Perhaps most significantly, the success of American military logistics validated democratic principles in the face of totalitarian challenges. Where Nazi Germany had attempted to motivate soldiers through ideology and coercion alone, America had demonstrated that free societies could outproduce, outfight, and outlast dictatorships. They achieved this by treating ordinary soldiers as valuable individuals deserving proper care and supply regardless of cost or convenience. The K-Ration, humble as it appeared to casual observers, represented a philosophical commitment to individual welfare. Totalitarian systems could neither understand nor replicate this approach to military organization. German generals who had once laughed at reports of American production targets learned too late that they had misunderstood fundamental truths. They had misjudged not just American industrial capacity, but the basic nature of democratic warfare itself. In their hierarchical worldview, soldiers were expendable resources to be used efficiently, but not necessarily cared for individually. The American approach treated every soldier as worthy of chocolate, cigarettes, and chewing gum. This seemed wasteful and soft to military leaders trained in Prussian traditions of discipline and sacrifice for state purposes. Yet this apparent softness concealed revolutionary hardness in practice. America possessed the ability to sustain combat operations indefinitely anywhere in the world. Industrial production could feed, supply, and equip millions of soldiers fighting simultaneously on multiple continents. When the last German resistance ended in May 1945, American soldiers were still opening K-rations packed with chocolate and cigarettes. They maintained the nutritional standards that had carried them from the beaches of Normandy to the heart of Berlin itself. The farmers and factory workers, whom German propaganda had dismissed as soft and weak, had indeed proven decisive in the war's final outcome. Their victory came not through individual heroism or tactical brilliance alone. Victory resulted from patient application of industrial principles to the ancient art of warfare. They had successfully transformed abundance into ammunition. Prosperity became power through systematic organization. Democratic values translated into decisive military advantage on battlefields worldwide. The laughter of German generals died completely in the ruins of the Third Reich. It was silenced forever by the quiet efficiency of American quartermaster sergeants distributing rations to soldiers. These men fought not just for victory, but for a way of life. This life considered every individual worth defending, feeding, and caring for properly. No matter how far from home the battle might take them, American abundance followed and sustained them until final victory was achieved.